Hi, I'm Paul Hogan with the Law Center for Car Accident Injuries. Why is it that an insurance policy is the most critical factor in determining the value of your case or how much money you're going to get when you've been injured by a bad driver? Let me start off by saying a legal crusher, a disclaimer, and the information I'm about to give is not meant as legal advice. It's information that's readily available on the internet. And if you have a question concerning an insurance policy, I don't have your insurance policy in front of me. I don't have the bad driver's insurance policy in front of me. So this is not meant as specific legal advice. It's general information. So there are two types of policies, and the first type is called a liability policy. And what liability policy is that when you commit a driving error, your insurance company, if you injure somebody, will be responsible for X amount of dollars depending upon how much insurance you buy from a company. So the typical policy in Kansas, the mandatory minimum, which means when you go to put tags on your car, you have to prove to the state that you have an insurance policy that will pay a minimum of $25,000 to one person, $50,000 per collision. That's called split limits coverage, and what that means is the maximum your insurance company would pay to any one person in a car wreck, even if let's say they had a $100,000 injury, your policy would only pay $25,000. Now let's say three people had $25,000 claims, then your insurance policy would pay a maximum of $50,000. So that's the split limits, $25,000 per person, $50,000 per collision, and then there's a property damage, which is $10,000. So that is a liability policy. The second type of insurance coverage is called full coverage. And what that means is that you've bought a policy, you usually pay more of a premium for full coverage protection. And full coverage usually includes comprehensive coverage, which means if you parked underneath a tree and a branch fell on your car, your insurance company would pay for the property damage to repair your car. Now, collision coverage is, let's say you ran into the tree, then your insurance company would pay you for the property damage to fix your car. So that's full coverage, comprehensive, and collision. Now, what's important is that your liability policy that we referred to earlier is actually 4 different policies rolled into one, and you can read each part of that policy as a separate policy. So we've already explained or touched on liability, meaning if you commit a driving error, your insurance company will pay those people that have been injured up to the limits of liability. And we talked about the minimum limits are split limits coverage called 25/50/10, 25 to any one person, 50 per collision, $10,000 property damage. Now you can buy higher limits to protect you. And truth of the matter is that we all buy the best insurance that we can afford at any given time. So if you want to step up in protection, you could buy what's called a 50,000, 100,000, 50,000 policy. The step up above that would be a 100, 300. And again, that would mean that if you injured a person, they had a $150,000 claim, the maximum your insurance would pay to that one person would be $100,000. The $300,000 is again per collision, meaning if you had 4 people with $100,000 claims, your insurance company would tell those 4 people they would have to divide the $300,000 amongst themselves if each of them had a claim that was higher than the per person. So this is where it gets a little involved. The third part of a policy, or the second part of a policy, is called personal injury protection. And that means as soon as you're in a car wreck, your personal injury protection policy, which is contained in your liability, is primary. It's very first. And so your medical provider will pay the first $4,500. And again, if you want more protection, you pay a higher premium to an insurance company, and you can buy protection all the way up to $27,500. There's a wage benefit that will pay up to a mandatory minimum of $900 for up to 1 year, and that is if you qualify. You have to earn more than $900. They actually pay 85% of your wage loss. So you'd have to earn somewhere around $1,200 in order to qualify for the $900 a month, and they would pay that up to 1 year. Now again, you can pay a higher premium and buy protection all the way up to $1,750 for 2 years. There's a benefit called essential services. So if you had a broken arm and couldn't drive, and you had a friend or family member driving you to the doctor, they could make a claim on your insurance policy for $25 a day, and your insurance company would pay that up to 1 year if necessary. And there's also $4,500 rehabilitation benefits. Now, one of the questions I'm often asked is, well, why are we making this claim on my insurance company? I wasn't at fault. And the fast answer to that is that's how to get these benefits right away. Because if you go to the bad driver's insurance, number one, they don't pay as you incur medical bills. They don't pay your wage losses that's incurred. They're not going to pay for rehabilitation or for essential services. They make one payment, one time, and that's when you sign a release saying you're not going to come back and make a claim for 1 penny more. So this benefit is a good benefit to you. The second question I'm often asked is, well, are my insurance premiums going to go up because I made a claim for PIP benefits? And that answer is usually no. And the reason is that this is required under Kansas law, and insurance companies are not allowed to raise your rates because you made a claim for PIP benefits. The underlying reason also is that they are going to go back and make a claim against the bad driver in order to get the money that they've paid out for you. So, but that's a whole different subject. The third type of policy contained in your liability policy is called uninsured motorist. And that means that if you're driving down the street and a bad driver commits a driving error and hits your car and you're injured, but they don't have insurance, again, you can go to your own policy and make a claim up to your limits for what's called uninsured motorist. The fourth benefit, the fourth type of policy in your liability policy is called underinsured motorist. And what that means is that if you have a higher policy, as I explained earlier, let's say you have a $50,000 per person, $100,000 per collision, and a bad driver has a $25,000 per person, $50,000 per collision, then if your injury, if your case has a value that is greater than the bad driver's policy limits, let's say, for example, your value of your injury case is $40,000, but the bad driver only has a $25,000 policy, then you can make a claim on your own insurance company for an additional $15,000. The way that would work is you would go to the bad driver's insurance, collect the $25,000, and then go to your insurance and collect the $15,000. The two other issues is that, number one, the maximum you could ever recover is the highest policy available. So what that means is, in this case, if your uninsured motorist policy is $50,000, that's the maximum you could recover. The second issue that I'm often asked is, well, are my rates going to go up? And again, insurance companies, these are called status claims. The status is that you were hit by an uninsured motorist, or you were hit by an underinsured motorist, and you paid for this coverage. So your insurance company is not allowed to raise your rates because you're making claims under a policy for which you paid the premium. So this gets complicated, it gets involved, and if you want some help, anytime you have a question, you can give me a call. I'll be glad to answer your questions. These policies are complex. I have read insurance policies. As a matter of fact, I keep a book that has the top 15 companies that write policies in the state of Kansas. I've read these policies. If you ever want to go to sleep at night, pick up your insurance policy and start reading it, and I promise you, probably by paragraph 3 or 4, you'll get a good night's rest. But the other thing is, if you ever want to know what your policy calls for as far as the amount of the coverage, there's a page that's called Declarations page, and it will have those limits, that whether it says in this policy it's a 100, 300, meaning they paid for a policy to pay up to $100,000 to protect them per person, $300,000 per collision. Again, if you have any questions, call me toll free, 866-303-1411. I'm Paul Hogan with the Law Center for Car Accident Injuries.